What's going on, everyone? Travis Brown with the Eagle over here. That's Robert Cessna. And the voice that you might hear that the screen you can't see, but you might see later, that's Alex Miller. We're all here in the Eagle newsroom getting ready to talk some sports. Cease, since you have a long relationship with this guy, I'll let you introduce our special guest today on this Facebook Live Zoom.
Yeah, Texas A&M graduate and former Eagle employee, even though he probably won't admit that, Michael Peters. Michael, good to see you again, man.
Well, thank you so much. I'm a proud former Eagle employee. That's one of the, like I say, it's unlike some of the other places I've worked. I never say that was the worst place I've ever worked, ever. No, I have.
That's great. That's great.
I know. Well, but like I say, I'm happy to be in the long line of really wonderful people that have worked there. And so, no, I had a great time doing that. And no, I love everything about it. And like I say, I loved working for you. And so, I mean, unfortunately, I guess, you're the only person left.
Wow. Yeah, it ways goes. But yes, Michael did a great job here. He's done a great job wherever he's been, award winner, big in the APSE. So, Michael, let's get right to it. Who's going to have live sports first, Oklahoma or Texas? What state's going to fare better?
Oh my goodness. We asked that question. We're doing something with our staff and asking people about stuff like that. Will there be football? I think there will be a disjointed football season where some people play and some people don't, and they do it in a really odd manner, and there won't be fans. That would be my initial thought as to what's going to happen. Now, whether that's the right thing to do, et cetera, I don't know that, but I think that might be the first thing we have. And I guess we're working on something, I think we have youth baseball tournaments happening this weekend in places. Wow. We have pictures on our website. Last weekend, the drag racing strip that's kind of in an unincorporated area between Tulsa and one of the suburbs north of town, they had stands full of people watching drag races on Saturday, I guess on Friday and Saturday. So, people are kind of itching to do something, and that's what's kind of going on. But I mean, generally though, there'll be some college football, but I just don't know what shape it'll take and whether it's the right thing to do or not.
Okay, get back to I'm fascinated by the drag racing. How many fans were there, and they just walk in, no checks, and just sit down, have a beer, and watch?
Well, we're working on that story for here in a day or so. But yeah, as far as I can tell, they just had a normal race schedule. They didn't do any they didn't distance people. There's people in the stands, and I don't know exactly how they were able to do that or how that worked out or who would have sanctioned that necessarily, but that's kind of, and like I say, it just tells you that, people are, for good or for bad, people are tired, and people just don't have the stamina to kind of just stay inside or to do some of these things. People just don't. And so, when you give people an opportunity to get out, they're out. Hopefully those people won't get sick. And hopefully they'll be all right. But I wouldn't have done it. But there's just some people who were ready to get out, and that's what they did.
Real quick, Cease, let me jump in. Of course, Michael Peters, for those of you who don't know, is the sports editor at the Tulsa World up in Oklahoma, covering all things Oklahoma State and everything sports-wise going in the state of Oklahoma. So he's given us our recap with what's going on in the Great White North, as you might say, the frozen tundra of Oklahoma.
Good point, Travis. Forgot to say Tulsa World. With that being in mind, I always think the Oklahoma AD always is kind of outspoken. So my question is, when Oklahoma does play that first home game, will they have full stands, Michael?
I wouldn't think so. You mentioned Joe Castiglione. Joe Castiglione he's done a good job in this process. He was one of the first people to come out and kind of do a video conference, do a teleconference, get on the phone with people and kind of, for lack of a better word, take control of the situation. As much as you can do, but at least be out there and have and speak and at least speak to the uncertainty of it. He's a guy that's, hugely well respected in the athletic community. I know that they this past week they promoted their interim university president to being their full-time president. I know he addressed, right now they're planning to have classes in the fall at Oklahoma, in-person classes. So that would, open the door to being able to have football. I just can't imagine that there's going to be full stands for sure. There may be some games where there's no fans at all. I find that hard to believe, but he's one of the people in general that I would trust, though, who I think has people's best interest at heart and would make a good decision. I really think he's good at what he does, and he's somebody that I'd feel strongly of anyone in our area, to make the right call. I would think that Joe Castiglione would be one of the people to do it.
As we look at the budgets moving forward for some of these athletic departments and the way that people are going to be managing their money within the athletic departments, are y'all forecasting that you might see more regional bus trips with some of these college athletics, and therefore a lot of some of these maybe old Southwest Conference rivals, some more of the regional flavor might come up, especially when you get into the smaller sports like basketball or baseball, softball, maybe even men's basketball, that while the sport has seemed to have gone national over the last few years, we might see a little bit more of a focus of a regional competition moving forward?
Well, no, I think so. And that's happened at least a couple of ways already in basketball. Oklahoma and Arkansas signed up to play a series at the BOK Center, which is our arena in Tulsa. It seats 17,000. And so that's already one thing. Oklahoma State and Oral Roberts have already signed a 2-year, for the 2020 season and the 2021 season. They've already signed a home and home for men's basketball. I don't think Oklahoma State has played at ORU in probably 20 years. So those are things that have already started to happen. The other thing that I think will, when Bubba Cunningham, who's the athletic director at North Carolina, he was the athletic director at the University of Tulsa, and he used to do kind of a quarterly luncheon with the local media. And he, another guy who's really good and who, when he was here, was very accessible. And one of the things that he always thought, and this situation may move us in that direction, is he always thought that football and basketball should be played at the SEC, Big 12, AAC level, but then he thought that all the other sports should be played in more like a Southwest Conference level, and you would have Oral Roberts and Tulsa and Arkansas and Kansas and Kansas State and Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, and maybe SMU and TCU and some of the other and maybe Dallas Baptist, and any of those schools that would play golf together and volleyball together and do that as a cost savings measure. I think that could definitely happen. I also wonder, I guess at this point, it doesn't seem like the NCAA is going to change at the moment anyway, their thoughts on the number of sports you have to be Division I. But I could see if that changes, you having a lot of schools, especially like the Tulsas of the world, who might get down to say, we're going to have these 5 or 6 sports, and as long as you will allow us to stay in a conference, and as long as you'll allow us to stay in Division I, we're going to shrink it down to just what the absolute minimum is. I could see that too.
What about when you look across the nation, a lot of athletic budgets are being cut, not Texas, not A&M. I wondered, what about your schools up there, the bigger ones, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, and then Tulsa, because I guess they're a little bit, even more so than Texas, might rely on oil money. And with the price of oil, I just wondered, I'm sure you guys have done stories, what about that moving forward?
Well, I think that's going to be a big factor. Tulsa, and I guess they're probably not excited about this, but they were ahead of that curve because they had, their basketball coach and athletic director and football coach took a pay cut a year or so ago. And I guess it actually, in reality, I don't think it was quite reality, a pay cut. They, I guess, didn't take some bonus money that they had coming as a way to sort of balance the budget. And then the University of Tulsa here, about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, cut their men's golf program too. So that's going to be a reality. And it's now, a couple of years ago when we wrote the story that, hey, Philip Montgomery, Frank Haith, and Derek Gregg all took, pay cuts, that looked like Armageddon. And now it just looks like business as usual. I know that at Tulsa, they were already having some problems, just from an academic standpoint, from budget matters. And so we haven't really been able to get into the who and the what of it, but have furloughed some of, their personnel throughout campus during this time period. And so I think, they're even further taking cuts in their athletic department. I don't know that it's quite hit as much when it comes to, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, but I do think it's going to come that way. And that's always one of the things that I've wondered about. I mean, I've wondered about this for years, because it seems like I always thought that college athletics and, the money that's spent on it was a cycle, and that, eventually, we would hit a ceiling and then we would drop back down. But it seems, it's been a steady move upward. And I wonder now, finally, if we're going to get into the situation of, why are we paying our head football coach $6 million a year? Why can't we pay him $3 million a year? Why are we paying our basketball coach $2.5 or $3 million? Can we only pay him, 1.5 or whatever? Why are we paying the strength and conditioning coach, $1.5 million? Or they now your offensive coordinator is making, that's the thing. We joked about this, before this happened, Tulsa might have been in the market for a women's basketball coach. Well, I bet you that Tulsa doesn't pay their head basketball coach more than probably the top 30 programs in the country pay their top assistant, probably. So I just wonder now if this will change those things. Honestly, I kind of hope it does. I hope things do cycle back around and people start to see the perspective of there are more things and more important things to life. Although what we do is fun and it's interesting and it has its place, there are other things that are more important, and sometimes you have to focus on those.
We're always talking so much about the coronavirus, what might be, what could be. I'd like to delve into some other things, since you're an expert. And one thing that I'd like from your perspective is you watched it. When Bob Stoops, so impressed with what he did in the time that A&M was obviously in the Big 12, able to watch that, and then see Lincoln Riley come in and what he's been able to do. Did you see Lincoln Riley having this kind of success? And is he a guy that's always going to be at Oklahoma, or do you see him maybe going on to the pros, or just, what do you think about the Lincoln Riley regime, how he was able to follow Bob Stoops? Because a lot of people say you can't have success after somebody like that.
Well, and that is something that's interesting, because typically when somebody like that leaves, it sometimes is 2 or 3 hires later before you're able to recreate that kind of success. I think Lincoln Riley is slightly overrated, but I say that given that people rate him so high that he's gotten to the playoff, in his first couple of years, and he's done a really good job, but he hasn't won a playoff game yet. So I think he's awesome, but I think sometimes, he's slightly overrated, especially locally. We tend to, you always tend to overrate the people that you're around all the time. I think
Sure.
There was a thought that he would have some of the success that he's had, because Bob Stoops left a pretty ready-made situation for him to have that kind of success. And he's done a good job with that. And he's obviously, so out there in terms of a guy, of an offensive mind, and a person who's able to, to build people. And just the fact that, and this is an unpopular opinion here too, I don't think Jalen Hertz is that good. And so I think he did a great job of taking what Jalen Hertz does well and exploiting it, and what he doesn't do well and hiding it. I think he's really, really good at that. Here's there are two things about – there's one thing about Lincoln Riley that is opposite of what I think about his future. By most accounts, Lincoln Riley loves to recruit. And sometimes I make the joke, I think he's almost, I guess, like Nick Saban, where the games get in the way of recruiting. Like, I wish we didn't have to play that game so we could actually go recruit somebody. And so sometimes I think he's so into recruiting that we miss the point that we're trying to actually win the games. But that goes opposite to what I feel like is I sort of feel like Lincoln Riley is a guy who will eventually want to test himself in the NFL. I feel like, I mean, I think he doesn't seem, I don't think he surely doesn't have a bigger ego than your average coach. I mean, I think he's probably more humble and a little more reserved even than your average, big time college football coach, maybe because he, came from Muleshoe and he's, a small town guy. And so he does still have some small town sensibilities. I just kind of think that as much of an offensive guru as he is seen to be, that at some point he's going to want to test himself out at the highest level. And just we were talking about, right now at this moment, who's the best football coach in the world? Bill Belichick is. Nick Saban is right there, but people still are going to tell you that Bill Belichick is the guy because he's the guy that's doing it at the highest level. And so, I just feel like that he's going to want to test that at some point. But no one's told me that or anything. That's just kind of the impression I get just from watching.
Oklahoma has a pretty storied history as far as minor league baseball goes. How weird is it so far heading into the summer, knowing that some of the places where y'all have some good minor league baseball that might be up in the air, or how different would a summer be in Oklahoma and some of the bigger cities in Oklahoma without that minor league baseball?
Well, it'll be disappointing and it'll be different. We've written some about that, and we have actually, I guess several years ago, the Dodgers, part owner of the Dodgers bought the Oklahoma City AAA team, and so that's where their AAA team is, and then they moved their AA affiliate to Oklahoma. I know last year, early in the year, Clayton Kershaw came and did a rehab start in Tulsa, and I think they sold out, in an hour, and they had, I think the ballpark seats close to 8,000. It's in downtown. It's only this is the 10th year of it, and it's super nice, and it's a great place to spend a summer evening, and it's a lot of fun. And we would definitely miss that. We have also we have a USL soccer team in town, and they've struggled for the last several years, and so a local group bought them and has put a lot of money into them, and has put a lot of money into trying to do something, and make it into an event. And that's all now, somewhere on hold. And so, those things are all, will all be disappointing, will all be different. I don't imagine, I know, I guess I've seen the report from what they're talking about doing to bring back, Major League Baseball. And I guess part of that is that they, feel pretty confident there won't be a minor league season. And given that minor league baseball is so fan driven, and it's so, that's kind of how those franchises survive is by getting people in there and making them events. I'm now going to probably be a little bit surprised if we ever see any minor league baseball here in town. And if you had told me in March when we first started this that we wouldn't have a drillers season, I would have been really surprised by that news. And now I feel like that's probably the way it's going to go. And like I say, it's very unfortunate because they're a really well-run group, and it's a well-run franchise, and they've got a beautiful stadium, and it's really, it's really a top-notch deal. And so, and it's going to be disappointing. Same thing in Oklahoma City. Actually, since I've been here, I've never seen a game. I've driven past Bricktown. I know that's where the Big 12 baseball tournament was for years and years, and I haven't been to a game there since I've moved here, and I've, every summer I say I'm going to, and then I end up not. But they have a beautiful ballpark there as well, and have been a really successful host of the Big 12 baseball tournament for years and years. And those are going to be things. Same way too, Oklahoma City hosts the College Softball World Series, and that's something that is a staple of of Oklahoma City, and a staple of coming up here in the next couple of weeks of that time in the calendar. And that's just something that won't happen either. And all of those things are disappointing. I myself, I'm a creature of habit. And so when this first started in March, and we don't have the NCAA basketball tournament, that's one of my favorite events. And it was hard for the first couple of weeks. And now I've sort of moved into a different mode where nothing's happening and you just expect nothing to happen. And so now I've sort of become comfortable with nothing happening. But I hope, for, our sakes and everyone's sakes, and especially for the people who've, have lost jobs and are losing jobs and have, and are unsettled, that all of these things get back to normal soon, or some sort of normal that will allow something to happen so that some of these things can operate.
You mentioned minor league baseball, and I read some stories about the College Women's World Series. Those are all good points. Do you feel because that you feel the Oklahoma economy is hurt worse than a lot of other places just because they have so many of those events where fans support the Thunder, all that? You're missing a lot of things beside college sports. A lot of times, like, we're missing college sports, but you're missing minor league baseball, some once a year deals, and you're missing a lot of stuff up there.
No, there's a lot of different things. Like I said, and like Texas is to a certain extent, we're drilled in from an oil basis, and so we've always talked about, right now I live in a place that if gas is $2.50 or $3 a gallon, it's an inconvenience, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not terrible, because that's kind of how things are motivated. And so I do think that will become an issue, like you say, for, OU and OSU, where some of their, bigger boosters have that in mind. And, it is hard. And I don't know, especially too, I mean, in Tulsa, when I've been here now, it'll be 9 years this summer. And when I first got here, there was a brand new ballpark and there was a brand new arena, and they were on different sides of downtown, and in between them there wasn't that much going on. And now, as sometimes will happen, you have had the development that is coming around the arena, and now you have, there's been big office buildings, other things have been built up there, and now they have had at the minor league ballpark, it's taken into this last couple of years, but now that development is happening by the ballpark. And so now you have, there's a really place that we really enjoy that, to go eat, that's been open for just a couple of years. It's right across the street from the ballpark. And there, or other places that used to be parking lots and other, old buildings that were run down that nobody was in around the ballpark now, that are becoming office buildings and developments, and have restaurants and bars and other things down below. And so it's taken a while for that to develop. And I can imagine, I'm sure those people are suffering, and I'm sure it would be hard for those people to not have a summer of baseball where you have, like, on a weekend series, on a weekend series, the Drills might have, 20,000 people in their ballpark over a Friday, Saturday, or I guess over a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they might have getting towards 20,000 people there on a 3-day week play. Have to be in downtown and, and be around.
I mean, go ahead, Cease.
I was going to say, I was going to switch gears unless you have another question on that, Travis.
No, go ahead.
I couldn't let you go without talking about the quotable Mike Gundy. And I just wondered, with the way the Big 12 has gone, is Mike Gundy's best years behind him or ahead of him?
My guess is they're behind him. I was on furlough the week that he held his press conference, so I was happy about that. So I didn't have to delve into that too much.
You don't have a mullet. I'd like it.
Yeah. When I first got here, people would tell me that Oklahoma State is Oregon. That's what their comparable is, because they had the, basically big booster who's pumped all the money into it, and they have, and they've got all the fancy uniforms, and that's where they're going. And I never believed that, and the reason I don't believe that, they don't recruit well enough to be Oregon. And like I say, you can go back to all the recruiting rankings, but Oklahoma State generally recruits in the 30s, and you can't be a top 5 or top 10 program in the country continuously when you sign recruiting classes that are in the mid 30s. You just can't do that. So what their formula is they recruiting classes that are in the mid 30s. They try to recruit the top 5 to 10 level skill recruiting classes. So they bring in a star quarterback, bring in, a star receiver, and, and run their offense around that, and then hope that they can coach up some of the other, some of the guys who are in the mid 30s to more like mid 20 guys. And that's how they do it. Now, they're going to have a good team next year. They have their quarterback back. They have their running back back. They have their, who was, in the Heisman Trophy conversation, a receiver who was in the Blitnikoff conversation. Those folks are all coming back. And so I assume they're going to be pretty good this year. But then next year, they're probably going to lull a little bit. And the problem, with Mike Gundy, Mike Gundy is he's just kind of your garden variety control freak football coach, and he doesn't. I mean, it's the Boone Pickens Mike Gundy dynamic was a lot like the Jerry Jones Jimmy Johnson dynamic. It was two guys who needed each other to be successful, but couldn't admit that the other one played a large role in their success. And now that Boone Pickens has passed away, Mike Gundy he's running it. I mean, there's not really anybody who's as big as he is at the university. There's not anybody really to check him. But the thing is that Mike Gundy has enough, the press conference things like like what he did, where he's is probably too fired up about guys coming back and not health focused enough. And then, the thing he did, I guess, a couple of years ago, where he threatened reporters that he wouldn't let anybody talk to him if they asked any questions about the receiver that transferred, or all the "I'm a man, I'm 40" stuff. I mean, all of those things. And then he's done a lot of too much of, hey, Baylor's looking for a coach, let me go take a look, or Tennessee's looking for a coach, or Arkansas. And he's done a lot of that. And so what's going to happen, I think, is that he's going to, if he can't, say like this year, win the Big 12 and be in the playoff conversation, assuming we have a season, then if he has a lull the next year or the year after, he'll probably have a lot of people turn on him. And that'll be the reason. The reason will be not what his success level's been. The reason was that he was too easy to make eyes to other jobs, or he was too cranky sometimes in public forums, and that'll be his downfall eventually, I would think.
I have two questions to throw out there, and then see if you can wrap up there. The first one, we have to shift back. I know you're an A&M former student. You probably keep as much tabs as you can with the A&M program. What's been your impression of the Jimbo Fisher era so far? And do you have kind of an outlook on what you think, assuming the 2020 season goes off as expected, what that might look like?
Like I said, I have a lot of unpopular opinions. I'm not a huge Jimbo Fisher fan. I don't like how, the whole Jameis Winston kind of stuff rubbed me the wrong way. Anybody who stands up and doesn't help others take responsibility, especially when there's issues with, violence against women, or, some of those kind of allegations, that always rubs me the wrong way. They clearly overpaid him. I mean, I think that's pretty clear too. So, I mean, but here's the one good thing about it is there's no pretense anymore. There's no, well, hey, we're getting better and we're working at it and maybe we're going to turn the corner. It's like, no, you should be winning at a championship level every single year. And if you aren't, then you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And so at least you can evaluate him that way. You know, honestly, I don't follow them. I watch as many of their games as I can watch that don't conflict with OU and OSU games or Tulsa games, because I have to. But here's what I will say though. I watched them this past year against Clemson, and I was so struck by how outclassed they were in that game that I guess it was did they play Auburn, then they played Auburn a couple of weeks after that. And instead of watching that game on TV, I went to the Tulsa, Wyoming game instead, because I knew what was going to happen I knew they were going to be outclassed because they were just clearly not as good as the good teams on their schedule. And that was kind of what happened this year. And so, you know, I got a chance to watch them, you know, against Oklahoma State, and it wasn't a very good Oklahoma State team. And, you know, their better players, I mean, their best receiver had been hurt and out. And so, you know, that's a game that they should have won. But those were two teams last year that I thought were pretty, you know, comparable. I mean, Jimbo Fisher needs to do something. And so, and it's time for him to do something. And I mean, he's a good coach. I mean, whether I like him or not doesn't matter in that regard, but he's a good coach and he needs to. But like the old joke they talk about, you know, when you get all these teams together, somebody's got to finish last. And so, you know, at what point is he going to beat Alabama? At what point is he going to beat LSU, you know, like a consistent year in and year out basis? I mean, I don't know that anybody's going to beat Alabama until Nick Saban retires. So it's just, it's a hard place to be. And, you know, but he needs to accomplish more for what they're paying him, I think.
Here's my other question too. I mean, I would be remiss being in a virtual room here with writers with such a good experience not to ask you, as we're in this Corona age where everything is about nostalgia and we look back on everything. What is your favorite or the best athlete that you ever covered, and or the best interaction or the funniest interaction you had with an athlete in your career, or a coach, or just your best sports journalism story?
Well, I guess the best person that I think I've ever covered was Jamaal Charles, and he played at Port Arthur. I guess by that time it was Port Arthur Memorial. Was it Port Arthur Memorial by then, or was it still Thomas Jefferson then? I guess it was Port Arthur Memorial by then. And I remember I was working in Beaumont at the time, and they played a district game in Baytown at Stallworth Stadium. And I was working in Beaumont, but I was living in Baytown and commuting back and forth at the time. And so I made sure to cover that game. I put myself down to cover that game because I wanted to see him in person and I wanted to see what he could do. And he didn't disappoint. And I mean, he was just awesome. And he was awesome in high school, and he was electric. I mean, I think I watched him at least, I think, once at the state track meet too, you know, where he's like, you know, he was a world-class sprinter. So he would have been a world-class sprinter if he hadn't. And so, I mean, I think he's the best person that I've seen in person, like at the high school level. I'm trying to think. I don't know that I have, too many funny stories. I mean, I remember, you know, I guess I've heard, you know, people are talking about the Last Dance, and I got a chance to see, you know, Michael Jordan in Houston play one time, you know, in one of the last couple of years in his career, and watch him against Olajuwon. I mean, that was a lot of fun. I was at the Cowboys 95 Super Bowl, and, you know, that was an experience. I mean, like, and so there's two people who I really liked talking to because I thought they were honest, and I thought they were good. Michael Irvin was a good interview. Michael Irvin was good in the locker room. Michael Irvin was a good person to talk to. And I love Charles Barkley. And I know that people sometimes hate Charles Barkley or don't. And I mean, and granted, Charles Barkley just talks to talk. I mean, he just says whatever. But I was a young reporter. I was working in Beaumont at the time. I would go over to some practices and some games to cover the Rockets. And back when you still did that kind of stuff. Back when or before. I remember one time Cease told me that things were so tight that you had to get permission to drive to Snook. And so before you had to do that kind of stuff, and before you could actually go places and do things, I would go to some practices, and he was just great. I mean, he would sit after a practice and would just talk to you for 5 or 10 minutes, and he didn't care who was around, and he didn't care what was going on. He would just talk, and if you brought up a topic, he'd be happy to answer your question because he was just happy to do it. And so those are kind of the people that that I really had good experiences with, that that maybe don't have as good of reputations or whatever. Like somebody like I never got. You got in interview situations like with Troy Aikman, but Troy Aikman was dull, and Troy Aikman was dry, and Troy Aikman was at that point really protective of himself and really protected by the organization, and so he wouldn't talk that much. And the same thing, like you go with like an Akeem Olajuwon, who didn't have that much to say and wasn't just super interesting a lot of the time. So it's different. I never, and then I guess I'll real quick, because this is a personal thing of mine. I loved Bruce Litsky, and Bruce Litsky, his brother, was my sister's godfather, and his brother and my dad went to college together, and they grew up running the roads in Beaumont together. And he was my grandmother's favorite golfer. And when I was working in Beaumont, he would come down and do clinics in the summertime, and I got to interview him. And I was so excited that he was as nice a guy as I hoped he was. And so because I idolized him growing up, and I got to interview him, and he was just as nice a guy as everybody said he was. And so that is probably the best thing that can happen as a sports journalist, is for you to meet someone who's as nice as they're supposed to be, because most guys aren't.
I'll leave you with 2 questions, Michael. With that being in mind, you're right, Jimbo has to do more for that contract, but Jimbo Fisher or Tom Herman, who's going to get to the college football playoff first? And the second part, should A&M and Texas play in football?
Tom Herman will get there first, I think, just because he's got an easier road to get there. And I think Tom Herman's a pretty good coach, and so I'm surprised that he hasn't done better at Texas, because I thought he did a really good job at the University of Houston, but he's super unlikable though, like in press conference settings and stuff. And so I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not. I mean, if you're gonna get drugged by Oklahoma every year, you can't try to be the smartest guy in the room, and so it doesn't play very well. Once again, here's another unpopular opinion. Yes, A&M and Texas should play every year. There's no reason they shouldn't play every year. It's stupid that they don't play every year. And the only people who think that have to be like 20 years old and have never actually been to an A&M Texas game to have seen it and to actually see. Look, I know, and I used to read the message boards all the time. I don't do that anymore because it drove me crazy. But A&M and LSU's not a rivalry. LSU doesn't care about A&M. LSU cares about Alabama and cares about maybe Tennessee or Arkansas. They don't care about A&M at the level that A&M and Texas care about each other. And it's just a different thing. Of course they should play every year because it's the way just Kansas and Missouri should play every year. I mean, and all of this, oh, well, we don't need them, or they don't need us, or we're helping. I mean, that's stupid. None of that stuff makes any sense, because you need each other, because you're both like the two flagship universities in the state, and you're two natural rivals to each other, and you should play each other. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I think a lot of people, and I mean, I think there's a lot of Texas people who would tell you that Oklahoma's was a bigger rival than A&M was, but Texas people still hated A&M though, and it was genuine, and the hate was genuine, and it was kind of well earned and well thought. I don't think, like I said, the LSU is not the same, Arkansas is not the same. None of that stuff is the same. And so there were so many games. We used to go when I was a kid. We used to go all the time, and I remember, we'd meet like extended family, and either my grandparents had a house in Calvert, and we would do something there and go to the game in College Station, or the years it was in Austin. The other side of the family who were Texas fans, they would have a hotel room in Austin where we would meet and, would have lunch or whatever. And I remember one of my favorite things, and it was sort of in the Jackie Sherrill, Renaissance. And I remember going to one of those games in Austin, and A&M, finally, won. And so that was back when it was on ESPN. And after the game was over with, we went back to the hotel room, and they were re-showing the game, and we turned it on, and the family that we were with that was from Texas were so mad that we were rewatching the game, they shut the TV off. And so but that doesn't happen against South Carolina, and that doesn't happen against Vanderbilt, and that doesn't happen against Kentucky, and that doesn't happen against Auburn. I mean, you don't have the same dislike like you do when you're in the same place and you're living in the same places and working in the same offices. No, they should certainly play, and there's no reason they shouldn't, other than just ego and bitterness.
And that's one thing that does excite me a little bit about the potential of this regional world that we might live in post-COVID. Now, we do have a case study, because I know you mentioned that the only people that might think that way are 20-something Aggies. Alex, why don't you go ahead and flip that camera on? We have our resident 20-something Aggie here. Should they play? Should they play, Alex?
All right. I see both sides of it. I grew up in College Station. I went to, I think, 5 A&M Texas games. I went to the last game that they played in College Station. I remember crying on the way out of the stadium after Justin Tucker hit the field goal, and I thought that was the end of the world. I see both sides of it, though. I see your point, Michael, of there's no reason they shouldn't play. I mean, it's the 2 largest universities in the biggest football state in the nation that there's really no reason to play. You hear why Tom Herman spelled it out. Florida State play, Clemson, South Carolina play. We see Kansas, Missouri, they get back on it. But at the same time, you see why Aggies don't support it. I mean, the way that Texas treated A&M on the way out of the Big 12, the way they handled the whole Longhorn Network situation, the way that the Lost Dodge treated A&M when A&M was exiting, we determine when that's going to be played again. Texas always taking control, always making A&M its little brother, and then A&M at the same time saying, well, hey, we have this excellent opportunity to go to the SEC, forge our own path. It hasn't really panned out as planned, but you can see A&M still has the chance to get there. I mean, when you play Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, LSU in one season, I mean, what more can you ask? And
win the
game. Win the game. Exactly.
Well, like I say, I once again, I have unpopular opinions. I don't think they should have ever gone to the SEC. I think at the time A&M made, a 100-year decision based off of 5 years of losing to Texas every year and thinking that they could never win a game again. And I thought that was the wrong spot. I mean, I think it would have been better. I mean, I think, and like I say, it may come back to that. We may, like Travis is talking about, we may end up being back to a situation where, well, okay, in football they're going to play Georgia and LSU every year, but in baseball and track and whatever else they're going to be playing Baylor and Houston and Rice and everybody else again. I think the SEC thing has been exactly what I expected it would have been for A&M. It has been a boost to them financially that from a competition standpoint has been about what it's been. They are kind of in the middle of the pack, except the 1 year that Mike Sherman left Kevin Sumlin, 4 NFL caliber offensive linemen and a dynamic quarterback and a all-pro wide receiver to play. And then even still they lost 2 games. But I think it's happened the way you would expect. I know that's an unpopular opinion. I value traditional things. I value rivalries, and I know that things change, but I don't necessarily know why they've changed to some extent. And once again, when we talk about, what have we gotten out of a world that doesn't have sports, I do wonder if we're going to get back, like we've talked about, to a situation where we should play these teams. We should play Baylor every year because they're 60 miles away. And we should play Houston and Rice and whoever else every year because they're 90 miles away. And we shouldn't be flying our volleyball teams to Florida to play conference games because it doesn't make any sense. And so, maybe we'll get to that point at some point.
Well, as the resident TCU grad, I guess I'm thankful that A&M decided to make the 100-year decision. I guess I have to throw that out there. Cease, you got anything else?
Just want to say, Michael, thanks. And I know great answers. And the fact is, you can tell that his dad, for decades, was and is the Beaumont A&M club, spent a zillion years, so you got to remember where he's coming from. Those are the right answers.
Well, can I also always tell a story about how Kevin Murray was in my living room?
Please do.
Well, no, I know. Well, that was back when my dad was helping recruit players to A&M, and Kevin Murray was in my living room. And
interesting.
And that's the like I say, that's always when Kyler Murray was here, I'm like, hey, and his dad used to be in my living room, and my dad used to give him money when he was playing quarterback at A&M. And actually, there's somebody else that we were paying to at the time, who's a very nice man, who's a friend of mine on Facebook, who has great things to say about my grandfather and my dad. And so that was, and then the other story I remember too, and golly, I can't remember which Kermit Davis assistant it was, who as soon as Kermit Davis got hired, they called my dad.
Fletcher, probably Fletcher.
Probably so, about trying to start, paying basketball players like they've been paying football players. By that time, my dad was kind of out of the paying players business, and so
had to pay for his kid. And so we
weren't able to help the basketball team. But like I say, they were able to give a street agent a calling card though, and get all that stuff squared away. But yeah, so
they don't call it Big 90 Texas for nothing, huh?
So we've been, like I say, my grandfather was a huge he was a huge A&M, and his father went to A&M too, and so we've been around a long time, and like I said, I would never regret having gone, and never regret the time that I spent there, and like I say, and don't regret the time that I spent at the Eagle, and that's always fun. Like I say, now I enjoy to some extent that we're all the same now. We're like one big happy family again. We're all back together, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Yeah, your dad was and is the Beaumont A&M club, did a lot of good work, and that's why you talk about having a passion. When people do things like that, they have a passion.
Well, and then I was lucky enough last year during muster, I was lucky enough to go down to Beaumont and introduce Shireen at the because she was the muster speaker last year in the Beaumont A&M club, and so I saw that she talked with y'all last week, and so like I say, I'm always happy to say that I knew her when she was just Shireen and not, the Pro Football Hall of Famer or the landmark journalist or any of those things. That she was just the person
Just serene.
and just the best basketball player at the Eagle Battalion Athletic Department pickup basketball games at G. Raleigh White.
There you go. There you go. Well, Michael, thanks so much for giving us a few minutes of your time. Again, that's Michael Peters, a sports editor of the Tulsa World, who is in our a network of papers. So, of course, we glad to have him on and get to talk a little bit about the state of sports. So, also big thanks to Alex Miller for producing this Zoom chat today. Thanks for helping us out with there. So for Robert Sesta, I'm Travis Brown. Be sure to check Tulsa World for all great content there, and theeagle.com, Aggie Sports, for all great A&M content. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Meredith, for giving us Michael today.
Thank you guys so much. No, that was a lot of fun. I appreciate that.